Hey, everybody. Welcome to the first edition of the Livable Planet Film Festival here in San Francisco and many other places around the world. When we started this film festival, we never really expected that it would be all in this kind of all virtual environment, but I think we've all adapted and we ran across these kind of really great films. We wanted to be able to bring it to you as we open the festival here on Earth Day of 2021. We have a really interesting film here that you just saw or that you might just about to dig into, The Burning Field by Justin Weinrich, who is the director of the film. How are you doing, Justin?
I'm doing very well, Chris. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, most definitely. Maybe a good place to kind of start is I think many of us have kind of read about, different kind of pollution that's caused by, the kind of ever burgeoning technology sector and the devices that we have in our back pockets and things. But, it's really kind of hard to imagine like what the people's lives that are in these places that do the kind of recycling are. What kind of, how did you kind of first hear about this big e-waste dump in Ghana, and what made you decide to kind of jump on a plane and capture the story you did?
So it started out, I first heard about it through an article I read in Wired years ago. And I don't want to get it wrong, but the title of the article was something along the lines of the nightmarish hellscape where your computer goes to die. And it was this big piece about Ugly. And to their credit, they have since published further articles that kind of, project it in a slightly more fair light. But this article was quite harsh, and it followed a photographer who was doing a project there about the kids who were working in this area. And my background is in anthropology, so kind of with my anthropologist hat on, I was really disturbed by the way that the people in this area were portrayed. And so that kind of led me to start doing some more research and watching some films and some, there was a frontline piece about the area and things like that. And, the same thing, I kept seeing the same thing over and over, which is what you see in a lot of films and environmental films fall within that. But I was seeing a lot of, experts and a lot of researchers talking in these kind of talking head interviews with the B-roll of these poor children who were then doing all the work. And so I wanted to really flip that and make something that was about this situation in this area, but through the perspectives of the kids who actually were there and the young people who actually worked in this area. And so it was really, so kind of how that came about, or how we went about that, was I teamed up with Anita Afonu, who's an incredible anthropologist and filmmaker in Accra, and then a production coordinator who grew up in the area. And so we, kind of found a way to really get an immersive, really get like an experiential perspective of the area. So that was kind of the sort of the core thesis, if you will, going into the project, was to tell something that, had been told a few different ways, and to kind of look at it in a really unique from a unique perspective. And kind of with that, I grew up mostly in South America, and I grew up watching these kind of old school ethnographic films, and that's what led me to that in terms of my studies, and then in terms of myself as a filmmaker, that's kind of how I've always wanted to sort of evolve that process and find kind of new ways, whether it's through technology or new ways ethically of capturing cultures. And so I wanted to do something that kind of that did both of those things. I consider The Burning Field very much to be an environmental film wrapped in an ethnographic film. So, you come for, whether you're into the ethnography side of it or the environmental side of it, you come for one and you get hit with the other, and hopefully leave kind of being impacted by both.
Yeah, one of the things that first struck me about the film is how poetic it is, in the sense that kind of meditative, in the sense of like you really just kind of like feel like you're immersed, in the sense that and so in some ways, it really kind of achieves this kind of great cinematic quality. And so, like, how, as a filmmaker, how do you kind of like, what are the different hats that you're wearing, kind of like as kind of like an anthropologist, ethnographic filmmaker versus, a journalist versus like a documentary filmmaker, what are kind of some of the things that, as you kind of hit the ground, that you wanted to kind of keep in mind as you were telling the story?
Sure, and thank you. I mean, that's to feel. Our goal was to make it feel immersive, so that's really wonderful to hear. And in terms of the approach, I mean, I think, I've worked in TV for quite some time now. I've done a lot for National Geographic, and I started my career as a cinematographer, and so I've spent quite a bit of time, working in these different avenues, knowing that I wanted to combine them in a way that when I do hit the ground, like in Agua we can have a very small crew. We can have a very, limited impact. We can really kind of, as much as is possible for a, 6'4" white American to do, really blend in and really kind of, be immersed. And so I was kind of juggling all of those in terms of the anthropological side. It was very important that, again, I be the only non-Ghanaian member of the crew, that I'm working with people who truly know the culture and know the people that we're dealing with. When we got there, it was probably at least 2 or 3 weeks before we pulled out a camera. We just spent that time really, essentially living with these people, and, learning how to do all the different jobs that they did and all that. And then as a journalist and as a documentary filmmaker, I think it kind of came, the technical side. Again, I was able to lean on Anita quite a bit, since she's a producer. She knows how films get made. She's a phenomenal filmmaker in her own right. And so I was able to kind of stay behind the camera more or less. And, I did both camera and sound. So really kind of focus on those and let her, run the interviews, let her, kind of be the face of the production in a sense. And it was also, we were there for 6 weeks filming. And so there was a real effort made to not produce this or not, direct this. None of these young people were ever given any sort of like, hey, can you go talk to this guy and ask him about this? Or, we really need to connect these two scenes. So can you please blah, blah, blah. It was all very much, observational. And, again, obviously we're a camera crew, we're going to draw a crowd, or we're going to get attention. But, we were there long enough that became less and less of an issue. And we were really able to get these incredible moments. And that's really what makes up the film. It was, condensed down to capture sort of a day. And it was, we purposely chose the three boys and the young girl who we worked with were kind of at different stages of their lives and of their time in Agua. So we were able to get a really kind of, far-reaching portrait of this place just through a smallish window. But yeah, I guess to go back to your question, I think it was a matter, you're kind of always juggling all of those things, but I think they also all work harmoniously in that, they all give you the same result. So we're kind of, we're working as an anthropologist, as a filmmaker. The end goal was really to get something that we could really, we could feel was a honest representation of what it would be like. I mean, that's really kind of the whole goal of this was, we don't want you to become an expert on e-waste. We don't want you to become an expert on Dagombe culture or anything like that, but we just want you to leave feeling like you spent a few hours in this place. And so with that in mind, I think, everything kind of, everything worked together and came out with what we had.
That's cool. And it's interesting to hear about your approach, because I think, obviously in the documentary art form, so much in the last decade or so is that there's been a lot of kind of elements of like narrative films have kind of blended in of like either recreating scenes or staging things or encouragement from the sidelines of stuff. So knowing that that you just spent all this time before pulling out a camera, I think brings a bit of kind of genuineness of what you're wanting to show and how your interactions are, but also, I mean, we see all these like great environmental or nature films, or at least the ones that kind of get top billing sometimes, where I think a lot of people underestimate how much of that these are very directed films,
Right.
as well. And so obviously this film was directed, but also not with so much of just like the director wanting to kind of like create a story of what they envision the place is, but reflect what the experience of being there was. And so I guess given that journalists around the world have kind of written a lot of like kind of print pieces on e-waste before, like what were people's reaction to you being there? I mean, was there any sort of skepticism, or was it just the idea that, hey, somebody's here and wants to tell the story, and they just kind of wanted to open up? And how did you kind of navigate that? And was there any concerns, or were people pretty just happy that somebody was there? And
There was a tremendous amount of skepticism, and I think rightfully so, because yeah, like you said, there has been a lot written and a lot documented about e-waste, and in particular Ogbogbloshie. And so yeah, we really had to kind of win over, like, again, this all back to what I said earlier about spending the time there before the cameras came out, I think is what saved us. And then having a Ghanaian crew, the production coordinator in the film, a young man named Abdallah, he grew up in that area, so everyone knows him, and he was able to put away money and put himself through college, and he's now working as a lawyer. He's an incredible man, and so that he was with us, like, got us in. He also told us which of the quote unquote union bosses we needed to give a little bit of money to, and so then they left us alone. And so yeah, getting access was definitely a challenge. And I mean, almost every day that I was there, I was watching other, a crew from Vice or a crew from an Italian, like some other film crew, kind of being, asked more or less to leave. So it was an interesting situation in that regard. And then getting the story was really a matter of, just letting it happen. I mean, there have been a couple other films about Ogbogbloshie that, there's some that are quite good, but they're very, they're very directed, like you said, or they're very produced. Or, having spent a bit of time there, I could watch these other films and be like, yeah, that's not really what this looks like. They clearly set, there are no mountains of computers on fire. There's a very specific way they do this. There's an art form to this whole process. And so I wanted to make something that, for better or for worse, was very, very honest, because it's a very controversial area. I mean, these people are doing something. These people are the people that work there are quite often vilified as, they're causing all this environmental, destruction, and they're doing all this. And, they're young people that have been sent by their parents in most cases to Accra to make money. And they don't speak the same language because they're from the north part of the country. And they're Muslim, whereas Accra is heavily Christian. And so for a lot of different reasons, they're kind of pushed out. And so they find themselves in this area and are forced to do this. I mean, you won't find a single person working in Ogbogbloshie who wants to be working in Ogbogbloshie. They all will tell you, like, I'd much rather be doing pretty much anything else, but there are no opportunities. So to vilify them or to make, to put them in a negative light, or to put what they're doing in a negative light, I think is a really dangerous thing, because it doesn't look at the full spectrum of what's going on there. And I think, kind of to that, why, and e-waste, sorry, I'm jumping topics, but e-waste in general is a very tricky thing, because a lot of these people are essentially doing the job that a recycling company would be doing if such a thing existed there. And, the burning is horrendous, but breaking down these materials and, pulling the copper, pulling the aluminum, like using all that, and then they sell it, and then it gets recycled. So, there could be, in a perfect world, ways to really make that a profitable and also a beneficial system for everyone, and there are ways that people, I think it was an NGO, sent a bunch of machines there that helps like strip wires so that they wouldn't have to burn them. The problem was it took too long, so they just burned the machines and they just kept going. So if there was the proper education, if there was like the other elements in place, there's something, because they are providing a service. I mean, they are, and a big part of this whole issue again is why is this stuff showing up there? Why is, stuff from the UK or the United States or China that was supposed to be recycled showing up in Africa at a landfill? Like, sort of these bigger questions. And, you could easily go down a rabbit hole kind of looking at all the players and all the kind of, gray area within international shipping laws that have led to this place. But it's for a project like this, it was really sort of an introduction to the problem by means, or a personalizing of the process through these four young people.
Well, I think the film does a really good job about that, of personalizing. I think the best films is that hopefully it's a catalyst for people to want to go discover more, so in the sense of like, no film can be the kind of encyclopedia. And so, but if you begin to care about the people and you care about the issue, then hopefully as you kind of dig deeper, the kind of those nuances kind of affect the kind of perspective, even just the way that you kind of read into a situation. Exactly. As we get close to wrapping this up, I guess, one question people often ask is this kind of like, what production life is like. And I guess, what most surprised you about your experience there? And how did you kind of also just dealing with, what is kind of somewhat of kind of a toxic and noxious environment, in the sense of like, did you ever feel like sick or, did it affect you? I mean, all this smoke. I mean, I'm just thinking of like, hey, I grew up in the rural area. Like when I was burning trash and I played, burned plastic, it didn't leave me feeling well. And so like, how did you kind of get through, those weeks? And did you have any kind of unusual challenges that you had to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, the smoke, it gets to you almost immediately. And I wore, my Anita and I wore masks, kind of like you see everyone wearing now, but we wore masks the first day and realized that was just one more kind of barrier. That was one more thing kind of, setting us apart or making us feel like outsiders in this place. So we stopped wearing those. The effects were pretty intense. I mean, without going into too much gross detail, like, it was, you feel it in your eyes, your nose is clogged. I sounded like Tom Waits after being there for a month. Like it really just gets in everything. And, again, it only goes back to the people who live in this. I was there for 6 weeks and I felt like, you get intense headaches from the fumes and everything. And they do, we don't really get into the film, but they're just starting to, get data from more long running studies, but the level of cancer that these young people they're starting to see in the people that have spent their young lives there, the amount of disease of brain damage in the kids whose parents worked there, like it's really horrifying and it's really off the charts. And what we faced was, it was intense, but it was a very small, price to pay to be able to be there and to tell their story. And any surprises? I mean, I was there for such a long time that filming wise, there weren't, I mean, I guess the big surprise I faced was an American team that I ran into of importers who did not like me being there and who made my life way more difficult than any of the locals did. I got along really well with the people there, again, because we took the time to build the rapport. But some of the interactions I had with other foreigners who were very concerned that someone was there documenting, a process that they're involved with. That was when things got a little hairy, honestly. But other than that,
given the ethical issues,
yeah. But other than that, it was pretty much just what you would expect from being in a place like that. Very uncomfortable, very hot, very, you know, um, almost claustrophobic at times because of the heat and the smoke. And yeah, a lot of, the young people that are there understandably are very weary of outsiders because of the way they've been portrayed in the past. And again, so it took a lot of time to kind of explain what we were looking to do and how we wanted to portray them and how we wanted to essentially give them the freedom to really be portrayed in the way that they wanted to be. And that made all the difference. But yeah, it's a weird place, because of the rise of, places like Vice or places like whoever, sort of online web-based, journalism outfits. There are so many people looking for these kinds of stories. Plus the rise in environmental journalism, which is wonderful and hugely important. But because of that, places like this are really, they become almost not quite tourist attractions, but they become like, really hotspots for people who were doing what I was doing essentially. And I don't mean to sound like a hypocrite. Like I was very much there, and I can talk all I want about how I like to think my approach was different and blah, blah, blah. But, really that's what we were all doing. And so, yeah, I think that's something that I think a lot about. And I think it's important for filmmakers to really consider is, especially if it's an environmental filmmaking or whatnot, is, how these stories are being portrayed and who is at the center of them, whether it's, these people, or you're doing something. I've done stuff on poachers or whatever it may be. It's really crucial to come at it from a well-rounded perspective, if you will, and to really tell these stories with the people at the center of them in mind, not just the issues. But yeah, it's an interesting place. And then the kind of the rise of like poverty porn or whatever you want to call it, like this, there literally are tourists that go to places like Ugbo just to check them out. And so yeah, I think that the job, and that's where I think kind of the anthropological side of filmmaking comes in with and really pairs with environmental filmmaking, I believe, in a really positive way, is that it looks not just at the issues but at the people. I think to really get anywhere, we need to address both in a very honest way.
Well, I think your film, The Burning Field, did a great job at that, and just thank you for taking us there, in this kind of filmic way. And so, if we can all thank Justin Weinrich,
Uh-oh. Not sure if you can hear me, Chris, but you seem to have frozen.
So Justin, what I was just sharing, I really appreciate the work that you do, and obviously thank you again for being part of the festival.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for playing the film. It's been an honor to be a part of it. Thank you.
All right, awesome. I'm going to stop